Hi, about a year ago I showed how to create a mobile app using an early build of the Ionic framework. So if you recall, I used Ionic app to create to create a mobile application that accesses WordPress freshly pressed. So as it turns out, the freshly pressed has a RESTful API, and what I did in that screencast was to use an early build of Ionic to create an app for this. So Ionic, you can still find that screencast in my channel. So Ionic has since released version 1.0. So what in this screencast, what I hope to do is to update what I've shown and to show you a few other new features. So let's get started. So for those of you who are following, I'm currently using Ionic, the latest version, which is 1.5.5. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to start first of all by creating an Ionic project. So Ionic start FB is the name of the directory, and I'm going to base it off a template called blank. So Ionic is a downstream app. It's a downstream Cordova app. So the commands are actually fairly similar to Cordova, except that for Ionic it adds a few more things. But by and large, if you know Cordova, the command is virtually the same. You just add the word Ionic, replace Cordova with Ionic. So currently now, what Ionic is doing is pulling in the blank, and then it is creating my project. So let's have a look at the project. So my directory FB is created. So let's go in. So that's the directory. As you can see, it's got a few more files which we will just leave for the time being. So what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to go into the www directory, and I'm going to delete everything except the lib directory. Okay, so the lib directory basically contains the Ionic the Ionic library. So what we'll do is that we'll start from scratch. So the prep is a little command of mine that just create three blank files. So the way we are going to do this is this: we're going to first of all start by creating a web application, test that, and then use Cordova of Ionic to convert that into a mobile app. So let's get started. So let me pull up my brackets. So I'm going to open the FB folder. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to www directory, and let's start with index. So I will start by saying freshly pressed. And now we are going to set up. So let me just bump that up a bit first. Okay, so now we are going to set up Ionic. Make it a bit smaller. Okay, set up Ionic, and so I'm going to the CSS style sheet lib Ionic CSS Ionic, and then add in the library, a JavaScript library. So I've used Ionic bundle, which it's bundled with Angular, and then now I'm going to set up my app, link in the CSS. So that is index.css, and I will also add in my script. Okay, so now that we're done, the first thing we're going to do is this: we are going to create the Ionic app. So our Ionic app is going to need a pane, right? Okay, so in the pane we will have a header, and we want to style our header. So we are going to use so we can use any of this thing. So this is a CSS part of Ionic. So let's use dark. Okay, and then we have the title. So it's h1 title, pressed. Okay, and for the content, okay, we will use a list. So the list is going to look like this. Okay, so that's the list. So it's going to be just ion list and ion item. Okay, so we roughly have the application set up, the structure of the application set up. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to start to create the app. So this is the job. So let's go app, Angular, module. I'm going to call it FB app, and it's going to have a dependency on Ionic. Okay, so let's create a controller, FB app controller. So I'm going to call it FB controller, and I will inject in scope. Okay, so let's create one model which I'll call blocks that will hold my blocks. So this is an array, like that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and hook this application up to our HTML page. So what we're going to do is that we're going to say ng-app, FB app, and here we're going to say ng-controller, FB controller, and also we're going to have a loop here, repeat. So let's say b in blocks. So currently we do not know what we are going to display yet. Okay, so let's run this application. So I'm going to use Ionic Surf, which will open up a browser like that. So let me just pull this up first and make this smaller so it looks more like a mobile phone. Okay, so something like this, a bit smaller. Okay, so now that we have got that, so the next thing that we are going to do is this. We are going to now create this. We're going to pull this in using $HTTP, Ionic's $HTTP to pull this data in. So what we're going to do is this. We are going to write a service. Okay. So let's come over here and create a service. So let's call this FB app service. I'm going to call it FB service, and the service is going to need $HTTP, and instead of using promise, let's use event. So I'm going to require the root scope to fire the event, and I'm going to create a function called FB service, which is my service. So let's create the FB service. So $HTTP $root scope. So since this is a function, we're going to define like this. So this let's call our function load blocks, and what we're going to do is that we're going to use $HTTP a get, and then we are going to, from the promise, we're going to add a callback that will receive the result. So our result. So once we have received the result, we can now fire the result, fire an event to notify our listeners that we have the result. So let's go scope $broadcast. So let's call our event FB app blocks, and then I'm going to fire the result. So this result is this whole thing. Okay, so that's the JSON object. So now to use this result, all I need to do is this: inject SVC in here, SVC. So now I'm going to listen to the event. So FB app blocks. Okay, I'm passing a function event handler. Okay, the first parameter is the event object, which I'm not going to need. I'm going to need the second one, which is my result. Okay, so if you recall, this is the result. So what we really want is the post. So this thing. So it's an array. So we say result post. Okay, for each element, for each block, we are now going to push it into our model. Okay, COPE. So what are we going to push? So let's see, what are we going to push? We're going to push author. So let's get the name, author name. So let's call this name, the author name. The next thing we're probably going to need is the avatar. So let's have a look at the avatar. So that's the avatar. So it's avatar URL. So let's call this avatar URL, the author URL. We will also going to need the title of the block. So it's the title, and we are going to need the URL. So it's URL, the URL. Okay, so let's do a few more. We will need, okay, so let's take the excerpt. And also we are going to need one more. Let's use featured image. So some blocks have featured image and some don't. So let's include featured image. Okay, so that's roughly our thing. So once we come in, we listen to that, and then for the blocks we just loop through them and add them into blocks. So now to display it, all we need to do is come to here, image, ng source. So it's going to be B. So we're going to show the avatar. So it's going to be avatar URL, and then we want the title of the block. So let's say h2, the title, and finally we want the name of the author. So something like this. Okay, so of course when we do that, nothing happens. So nothing happens yet because we haven't actually loaded anything. So what we need to do is this. So let me just open the little thing down here so we can see if there's any error. So what we need to do is this. We need to say fp service load blocks. Okay, so let's see what happened. Okay, so we get some error. So $scope is not defined. Index 29, 20. Oh, sorry, not scope, is root scope. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so now we have this list. So that's the avatar, that's the title, that's the name. Okay, so let's format this a little bit. Let's format the image a little bit. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to add a class here called thumbnail. Okay, and I'll add in this here. So let's create thumbnail class, and let's change the width, the height of it to like 42 px. Okay, let's make it round. Border radius 21 px. Okay, so let's float it left. Okay, and let's put a little space between the text and the image. So that would be margin right. Okay, so that's now our application. So if we reload it, you'll notice that it goes and load and it comes back. So one thing you will also note is that that when I click load, the screen is blank for a while and then it displays, because it is actually making a request. So to have some visual feedback for the user, what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to put a dialog box. So I'm going to put a little message that says, the block is loading. And what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to use the Ionic loading. So it's loading. So this particular thing, I'm going to use Ionic loading. Okay, so to use that, what we do is we inject in the Ionic loading service. Ionic loading service, and then at the start of the controller, we say show template. Okay, loading blocks, and then after we have loaded our blocks, we say Ionic loading height. Okay, so let's try that and see. So let's try it again. Nice. Okay, so we have got our application sort of done. So also you notice that some of this title has got this stuff like this, which are escape characters. Okay, so Angular doesn't allow us to directly inject HTML into the page, into the view. So any HTML will be converted into text. So what we want to do is this: we want to ensure that before we inject any HTML in, first of all, that it is okay, that it is clean. So we want to get Angular to sanitize it first, and then we have explicitly tell Angular that we want to insert this text as HTML and not as text. Okay, so the first thing is to clean it first. So to clean it, we're going to use an Angular service called SCE. So I need to inject that in. So in the controller, like that. So I'm injected in. So the title, I want to say SCE trust as HTML. So I'm going to trust this as HTML. So that's the title. If you notice, the excerpts also has some HTML in it. So the excerpt. So probably that's a good idea as well to do that here, to sanitize that here. Okay. Now to display this as HTML, okay, we say ng bind HTML the title, and we remove this from here. Okay, so if you notice that now all the escape characters has been converted into text. Okay, so our application is about 50% ready. So the next thing we want to do is that, if you notice, is that Ionic has these two things: pull up, okay, and also pull down. So what we want to do is this: for the pull up like this, we want to implement infinite scroll. So in the freshly pressed RESTful API, there are some parameters that you can put. In particular, you can actually included with the call, you can actually put a before. So what the before does is that it returns the post before this specified date and time. So if you look at our result, right, you will notice that when the result comes back, there is a date range specifying the oldest and the newest and the oldest result. So what we are going to do is that we're going to modify our service a little bit to include the oldest in every call that it makes. So that will give us the ability to to have infinite scroll. So let's do this step by step. The first thing we want to do is that we want to modify our service first. So what we're going to do is this: we're going to say scope, and we'll add params. Initially it's going to be blank. So after the first load, we will say params. So the name of the parameter is I think is before. So we say before result date range oldest. Okay, so now we modify our service to include in the params to call. Like that. Okay, so you need to do that. Scope params. So currently it doesn't really do anything yet. Okay, so that's our call. So the second thing we need to do is this: we need to inform Ionic that, you know, when we pull it up, we want to start the infinite scroll process. So Ionic has a infinite scroll feature. So let's look at scroll, this thing. So the way it works is actually quite simple. You have a directive that has got a function that says load more. So in load more, what you do is that you do the load. So after you have done the load, you need to tell it to stop that the infinite scroll has completed by just broadcasting this event. So let's implement that. So I'm going to create a function scope called load more. Okay, and I'm going to move this function in. So the reason why I do that is because when you first load the application, the page is empty, so that will trigger an infinite scroll. So infinite scroll which will come in here, and this will start loading. So now I need to do is go scope to tell it to complete infinite scroll complete. Okay, like that. Okay, so currently it's not doing anything because I have not really added the directive yet. So now I will come here and I will say in infinite scroll on infinite load more. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so if you notice, infinite scroll will come up. Of course, you can customize infinite scroll by having, you know, your own icons and things like that. Okay, so let's just put a count of the number of blocks in the header. Okay, so you notice that it is loading. Okay. Okay. So similarly, there is also pull for refreshing. So let's say we want to, you know, if we pull this down, we want to reload we want to reset the whole block and reload, you know, it again. So again, pull to refresh is very similar to infinite scroll. You can find it here. It's called an ion refresher, and it's the same. It has a directive, and the directive has a method that is called, and after that you just fire the event when everything is done. So let's add infinite scroll. So let's do this first. So let's say scope, scope, okay, reload function. Okay, so since we are reloading, we need to reset our parameters. So scope blocks, set it to null. Scope params, set it to null, and then go fpsvc load blocks. So we can call it like this. So once it's done, we will say scope $broadcast that would be scroll refresh complete. scroll. Okay. So now all we need to do is come back here and go ion refresher. Then it is pulling text. Okay. Reload blocks, and on refresh is reload. Okay, so let's try that. So the infinite scroll is still working. So if we pull it down, reload blocks, and we let it release it, it will reload our block. Okay, so let's add a few more things. So now that we have got infinite scroll going and we can now refresh our block, the next thing we probably want to do is to handle the clicks. So that's actually quite easy. So for every ion item, you want to say ng click show the block, dex. So we pass in the index of the repeat. So that's show. So all we do is just create a function. We call back function which takes in the index, and then we will just, for the time being, we will just console log it first. Console log. So it's show blocks $index URL. Okay, so let's try that. So Control Shift I and C, so we can see that it's actually showing. Okay, so goodbye to right. Okay, so the other thing that we may probably want in our app is that we want to share. So if we read a blog and that we really enjoy, we want to share it. So what Ionic has is an option, but in list, Ionic has this thing called an option button, which allows you to slide out to reveal a button, right? So that is Ion option button. So that's the thing. So it's actually quite easy to use. So what we need to do is here, inside here, we say Ion option button, and the color of the button, let's say the button we want red, but let's say we want yellow, bar energize, and then we say this is share, and we want to have a click, say share. It's very similar. We'll pass in the index so that we know what we are sharing. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Notice that. Okay, so let's add the function. So basically it's the same. So instead of typing, I'll just do that. So this is share. Okay, so let's try that. So that's my share, and we can click this. So one thing you also notice is that after I've clicked this, it will be really nice if I can close, if the button can close automatically, but currently it doesn't. So that's the default behavior. So if you want it to close, you need to control it yourself. There is a service called the Ionic list delegate, which has a function called close option buttons. So what we need to do is this: we need to inject in the so my dependency list is getting quite long. So let me just bump this down here, format it a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to inject in is Ionic list delegate. Okay, like that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is this: I'm going to inject. Oh, okay, there's an error. So it's not a function. Okay, so the Ionic list delegate. Okay, and here after I have share, I will say Ionic list delegate close option buttons, like that. Okay, so Okay, so our application is done. So the next step, the next thing that we're going to do now is this: we are going to wrap this up and make this into a into a mobile app. So before we do that, we need to add two things. Okay, so we need to set up Ionic Cordova. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to add in a script called Cordova.js. So this Cordova.js will be generated when we build the app. The second thing that we need is something called content security policy. So the content security policy is a new security policy that will eventually replace Cordova's whitelisting. Okay, so I'll let you read this up by yourself, but what we need is something like this: meta http equif content security policy, and then we say the content of this is default source everything. So we are just basically letting in just setting the default setting. So if you so you can come to HTML5 rocks to get more detail. Okay, so now that we are done with that, we will now go back to command line, and what I'm going to do is this. Let me just close that first. Control B1. Just quit this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to now go and generate my the platform. So just before you do that, right, you may want to check your configuration. So in our case, we are going to do, since I'm running on Linux, I will generate an Android app. So what I'm going to do is this: you want to look at config first. Okay, so a few things in configs. You may want to change the widget ID. So this is especially important if you're Android. So I will change it to Acme freshly pressed, or whatever ID you want. So the second thing, of course, that's very important is the name of your app. So this is what is going to be displayed. So I'm going to call it freshly pressed. Okay, and the description. Okay, app for WordPress. Okay, and your author ID and whatever things that you need. The second thing we are also going to need is we're going to need an icon. So if you don't give an icon, you'll get the standard Ionic icon, which is a little blue circle like this. Okay, so what we are going to do is this: I've got an icon prepared. So that's the icon I'm going to use for my app. So what you need to do is this: create a directory called resources at the root, and copy in your image into resources, renaming it to icon.png. Okay, so now we have my icon in there, my image in there called icon.png. So this is the same as the image I've shown you just now. So now we can add platform. So I would say Ionic platform. So you can see what the list of platform that is supported. So those are the list of platform that's supported. So I would say add Android. So Ionic will now go up and grab and generate the directory, and you also add a bunch of plugins. We will get to the plugins in a little while. So the next thing we're going to need to do is that we're going to need to generate the icon. So we'll say Ionic resources icon. So Ionic will go off and generate that. So now we are done. So let's build our project. So we'll say Ionic run an Android emulator. So if you're doing this for the first time, Google has changed the build system, the build from Ant to Gradle, so you need to wait for a while. Gradle is a bit like Maven, you need to download the first package. I've done this a few times, so that's why mine is quite fast. And this is our app. So if you see, the infinite scroll is working, and we can also pull to refresh. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is this. When I click on one of this, I want to show the block. So to do that, I'm going to use a plugin called InAppBrowser. Okay. So the way you use InAppBrowser is you go InAppBrowser, open, you give the URL, open it blank, open it on a separate window or separate activity, and then location, yes or no. So this location determines whether the browser should show the address bar. So for our case, we are going to say no, because we want to integrate the we want to make the experience seamless. So we want to hide the address bar so that the browser looks like it is part of our application. And then so we can go from the browser back to our list again, back and forth. So to install, we go Cordova plugin, we do that. So let's do that. So we go so instead of Cordova, we use Ionic plugin, add, and that is called what is it called? Cordova plugin InAppBrowser. Cordova plugin InAppBrowser. Okay. So let's list and see. So the InAppBrowser has been installed. So now we need to go back and make a change here. Okay, so this is in show. So we will say Cordova InAppBrowser. That would be open, the URL blank, and location no. So that would be open. Use that. Okay. The next thing is blank, and location is no. Okay, so let's build this again. Okay, so click on Taylor Swift. This is the InAppBrowser. It is loading that block. So this is the block. So if you notice, there is no address bar for the InAppBrowser. So we can go back. So the browser looks like it is part of our application. Right. So we can say, oh, it's the same one. So why is it loading that twice? Oh, looks like there is a bug. I'm actually loading that multiple times. So let me just go back and have a look. Load params. DST. Sorry, missed that. Okay, so that should be okay now. So let's try that again. So hopefully we will get new blocks. Yes. Okay, good. So we're getting new blocks. Okay, so we can go. Okay. My network's a little bit slow. Okay, and also if you come to the application, so that's our icon, and that's freshly pressed. That's the name that we changed in config.xml. Okay, so the next thing that we probably want to do is this. We probably want to do a share. Okay, so again, we are going to use a plugin. So let's look at Cordova plugin, social sharing. So there's a few. I'm going to use, this is the one that I'll be using. It's quite simple. I've used it a few times. So the way you add it is the same. Cordova plugin add, Cordova plugin social message. So let's do an add Cordova plugin social message. So let's do a list to make sure that we've got that in. Okay, so social message. So the way we use it is like this. So you just want to share the URL. So it's Windows social message.send, and that's the message. So we're going to come back here, and we are going to this particular thing. So we're going to say Windows social message send, and so it's going to be URL. Like that. Okay, so let's try that again. So we build the application again. Okay, so let's do sharing. So we've got this new message. So if you do it on if you install the app on a real phone instead of an emulator, what you get is you get a list of applications that that is capable of accepting a URL and to share. So things like what's your WhatsApp, if you have installed, or your Facebook or your Twitter, those apps will be displayed. So from the list you can select one. But since it's emulator, so the only thing I can share to is a one of this message. Okay, so now we are done. So one final thing before we move on is this. So let me go. So if you notice, right, in most plugin, for most plugin, they would say something like this: the plugin, or in this case, the in-app browser, is not available until after device ready event. So device ready is like the document ready event in the browser. So as you know, the document ready event is fired when the browser has loaded your document. So the device ready event is fired by Cordova when Cordova has initialized and sort of have connected with the platform. So before the device ready event, right, you cannot access any of the mobile platforms features like network, for example, or Bluetooth. So in our case, so far we have been taking for granted that once the app is loaded, the device ready is fired. The device is ready, and we can actually make network connection. Or this may work on some phone. In fact, we may work on most of the phone, but it may not work on some other type of phones. So we actually need to listen to the device ready event. And this is especially important if you are using features like Bluetooth, and NFC and features like this, where you need to absolutely have to have the device ready event fired first before you can start accessing those features. So for our case, Ionic has a service called the Ionic platform, which has a function called ready. So what happens is that so if you put a callback in this ready will be called when the device ready event is fired. So for all other applications, you have to either listen to, so if you're using like jQuery or jQuery mobile, then you have to actually listen to the device ready event explicitly from the document object. So what we're going to do now is this: we are going to inject in the Ionic platform. Okay, Ionic platform. So let's inject in the Ionic platform. Okay, and what we will do is this: we will define a model called device ready, which will initially be set to false. Okay, so what we are going to do is this: we are going to tell infinite scroll. So if you remember, when application is first loaded, the item is blank, so this will trigger the infinite scroll. So we want to stop infinite scroll from loading until device is ready. So we use ng if device ready. Okay, so now all we need to do is this $Ionic platform ready function. Okay, oops, function, and then we say so once the device is ready, this function will be called. So we can say scope apply and then we say $scope device ready equals to true. Okay, so once this is true, this will release this, and so the load will start. Okay, so let's save everything and let's see. Let's try our application again. Okay, so device ready, so it releases, so it sets, the application sets the device ready model to true, and so now our infinite scroll loads the application. Okay, so I have actually another view. So let me just copy the view in first. So this is the cart view. Let me copy into the www directory, which is exactly the same as the one that we have, except that it displays the block as a card. So the card looks something like this. It is styled using, so the card looks something like this. So let's have a look at this and see. Let's have a look at the card. So I've copied the card into the www directory. So what you need to do is this: instead of renaming it to index and changing it, what you can do is you can go to config.xml and you can change the content source to card. Okay, so the card looks like this. So it's got a few things. It's got avatar, the title, sort of the same. So it also has a featured image, which I have included as part of the block, and you also have informations like the excerpts. Okay, so you change that into card to card, and now you rebuild the application again. So now it's going to be displayed as a card, hopefully. Okay, so now it's a card, right? So this is the featured image, and this is the excerpt. So if you want to read this, so we click on that. So everything is as before. So we can still share the block that we like. Okay, so let me just change that back. So let's say I want to do this. Change it back to index first, and let me just rebuild it again. Okay, so let's say we have, what we want to do is this: whenever the phone is flipped landscape, I want to change from a list to a card. So if I go back to landscape, sorry, if I go back to portrait, I want list, but if I go sideways, landscape, I want it to change to display a card instead of showing as a list. Okay, so there are many ways of doing it. So the way that we're going to adopt is that we are going to go into the Cordova application in Android and do the customization there. So the idea is that I want to show you how you can customize the shell. So open up your Android Studio or whatever you're using. If you're using Eclipse, then use that. And what you do is you go into your Cordova project. So that mine will be FP. So go into platforms and open up the Android project. So you actually get two projects. Oops. Okay. Okay, so you actually get two projects. So is this like this? Okay, so let's do it here. So let me just minimize this. Okay, so you actually get two projects. So this is our project. This is the sub project, which is the Cordova library. So leave that alone. So for our case, open up Android, open up Java. So if you can find your package or your widget ID. So in our case, that's our widget ID, and main activity is our application. So that's the one that we're looking for. So this URL is actually looks like this. Android So this thing comes actually from content source, as it says here. So now all we need to do is to add a callback, or to implement the on configuration change. So that will listen to the orientation when there's orientation change, and then we say switch new config orientation, and then we say case configuration orientation. So if orientation is portrait, we just want to say load URL, and we use the original URL, LA launch URL. Okay. Otherwise, if the configuration is landscape, okay, then we want to load Android asset card.html. Okay, so everything else, we just ignore it. Okay, so now since you're in Android, you got to be careful. Whatever API you're using, make sure you remember to add permission. So for our case, listening to the orientation change doesn't require any additional permission. But in case you are doing additional things, just make sure that to remember to check if the API that you're using requires any permissions. So now that we are done, we will now so let me just minimize this. We will now build the app. Okay, so let's make sure that our app is still working. So the network's a little bit slow. Okay, so our app is still working. So now the big test, we're going to put it sideways, and now it is in card form. Okay, and we can read it. Okay, and swap it back, change it back, and it should get back to card form. Okay, so hopefully with this screencast, you are it will get you started on using Ionic to build your mobile app. Thank you for viewing this screencast.